misdemeanor site.
10-4-12. Welcome to Law and Order BUX. I'm your host, Bucks County Sheriff Fred Harran. Every corner of Bucks County has a story to tell. Sometimes a story of resilience. Sometimes a story that chills us to the bone. Sometimes a story of government not being able to get out of its own way. Here, the forces of law and order are constantly at work, often behind the scenes. Join us as we delve into the gripping realities of crime and justice in our community. We'll explore the hidden worlds, the difficult decisions, and the unwavering commitment it takes to maintain law and order right here in Bucks County. Hi, welcome to episode 3 of Law and Order BUX. I'm your host, Sheriff Fred Harran. Thank you for joining us again. Very excited this episode. This might be the best of all time, even as episodes go on. So after listening to today, we're going to need you to do something. We're going to need you to do something that's going to make a difference, going to change lives, going to save lives. I want to introduce you to Ashley Spence. Ashley, I've known for a bunch of years now. We've been doing presentations across the country. We've been doing some other webinars, Ashley and I, along with some other folks, and she is just incredible, and we're honored to have her today. Ashley is a motivational speaker, tireless victim advocate, and the founder of the DNA Justice Project, a vital nonprofit that educates the public and policymakers, that's key, policymakers on the crucial role of forensic DNA in the criminal justice system. At just 19, Ashley survived a harrowing home invasion that nearly cost her life. It was years later that DNA evidence finally brought her attacker to justice, securing a 137.5-year prison sentence. This profound personal experience is the driving force behind our unwavering mission to ensure justice for every victim, inspiring legislative change and global conversations to combat sexual violence. So what's going to be the call? What's Ashley going to talk about at the end of when she shares her experience with us and why this is so important? Let's bring you back to Pennsylvania. Let's bring you back to the United States, 1998. A kind of a program, a project, an initiative, a thing you've heard on television called CODIS, C-O-D-I-S. CODIS came around in about 1998 and stands for the Combined DNA Indexing System. It's the database of DNA that the FBI controls at a federal level. And the FBI is where it belongs. They do an amazing job. There's never been a breach in CODIS since its inception in 1998. And every state makes laws and rules on what can go into CODIS. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about Pennsylvania specifically. So Pennsylvania has 3 CODIS labs. Philadelphia Police runs their own. Allegheny County for Pittsburgh Police and the other municipalities around that county. And the Pennsylvania State Police has a CODIS lab for all the other municipalities in Pennsylvania. It's about 1,200 police departments that feed into that system. And then CODIS is made up of 3 other systems, 3 other branches of CODIS, an ELDIS, an ESTIS, and an ENDIS. An ELDIS is a local database, which we'll talk about in episodes to come, because as I told you, DNA has become a real interest and hobby of mine since 2010. Then there's an ESTIS, a statewide database, which we've got some great news coming out of our friends at Pennsylvania State Police on that, which is going to come out in later episodes. And then an ENDIS, a national database. And what does that mean? What does that mean to us? That if a crime is committed here in Pennsylvania, or you're a victim of a crime, and if your DNA gets into the system and the person is found in California, because California is a arresting state, that individual could hit to your DNA here in Pennsylvania. But that's where the problem lies. Pennsylvania, along with 18 other states, are only convicted felon states or conviction states. In Pennsylvania, we do not take DNA mandatory at time of arrest, and that's something that has to change. And with that said, I'm going to turn this over from the beginning so that Ashley, my good friend, she can tell you her story. And after you hear what she has to say, you're going to finish this podcast and you're going to start writing letters and making calls. Without further ado, Ashley, take it away.
Oh, thank you so much, Sheriff. And I'm honored to be on this podcast. I'm excited for you to spread your message far and wide because you are one of my heroes. You said I was, but you really are. You've been championing, DNA advocacy and justice and keeping our community safe and for decades. So I'm so grateful. And it's very important to me, not just because I'm a mother now, but because I am a survivor. I was 19. This was years ago at this point now. It was 2003. I live in Texas. That's where I was from. And I was just, an excited college student, wanting to be a 19-year-old, spread my wings, go back to school. And I went to college early. This was the start of my sophomore year. I had a great time my freshman year. And a lot of people I knew in Austin just kind of stayed home, So I felt like really liberated that I had chosen to fly and get out of the nest and meet new people. And so I went to school like a week and a half early before it started my sophomore year to get to know my new roommate, to move into my apartment. And, Phoenix at that point and Tempe, Scottsdale area, it was very college centered. It's grown a lot, but it was really based around the school at that point. And so I lived in a giant apartment complex, and it was primarily college students that lived there. So at the time that I went, because I went early, it was a little bit isolated. Now that I reflect on it, there weren't a lot of kids coming in and out, but, we moved in and they put us in the very back corner unit on the ground floor. It was Building K. I will never, ever forget it. And I remember it was pretty desolate. It was an empty parking lot. And then there was a fence and then just big trees that, blocked what was ever behind it, another neighborhood. But I was thrilled to be back, and I went out with my girlfriends. We were so happy to be reunited that night. But before I went out, it was really strange because I'm talking on the phone to my mom, and we had become very close since I had left. And, it was a really hot Arizona night and the sun was setting. And I remember it just, turned shades, almost like a painting from, blue to orange to darkness. And in that time when I'm speaking to my mom, I just all of a sudden felt this nudge that was deep in like the pit of my stomach, that something was really wrong. And it wasn't like an anxious feeling like in the chest. I thought maybe, I'm 19, I'm going out with my friends. Maybe we're going to get into some college age trouble, and I was like, oh no, I hope not, just, I had no clue, but I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. And it got so profound that I didn't want to hang up the phone. And I eventually did. And I went out with my friends. We took a cab home later. We all were hanging out in my apartment, and my roommate at the time, she had a new guy over, and they went to bed in her room. She was in the master bed, and I had about 5 girls over, and we were just talking, and one of our friends had suffered a really tragic loss in high school, and we were just consoling her still. And it got so late a few times. I remember I told my friends, I'm like, why don't you just stay here? You can, take my bed, the couch, we can make a pallet on the floor or whatever. Just stay here. It's getting so late. And, eventually they just decided they needed to go home. So they all got cabs, and I went to bed as I always did. I was very fortunate in my life. I always felt safe. My parents made me feel protected and cared for. And so I never in a million years could have imagined how my life was about to be shattered, ever. And I went to bed that night, as I always did, feeling safe. And unfortunately, this night I just wasn't. And while I was asleep, an intruder entered my apartment, came into my bed, and I always slept. It's kind of weird now that I think about it, but I always slept on my belly, and I put a pillow behind my head because it could help keep light out. And I couldn't hear things. It's just how I always slept. It's very strange, but kind of like the perfect storm, because I was asleep like that, and he came into my bed and, smothered me with the pillow. And I just remember vividly thinking, oh my gosh, wake up from this nightmare, wake up, wake up. I kept saying that into my head, wake up, Ashley, this is a nightmare. And, normally we can shake ourselves from these nightmares, but this night I couldn't. And I thought, oh my God, I am going to die right now. I am going to die. And I tried to fight with everything in me to make it stop. And at that moment I was nearly killed. He had flipped me over, smothered my face, and began to beat me so severely. And I knew I had two choices. I fight and I'm killed right now, or I have to let this happen to try to live. And so I really wanted to live. And so I was very violently raped and beaten and tortured in unimaginable ways for hours throughout the night. But I'm very fortunate because I survived. I didn't think I would. And, you know, when he decided he was done, I remember I couldn't see anything, but I could see out of the periphery of the pillow, and I just saw his two fingers open the blinds, and I remember seeing the sun shine in, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's morning. Like, how could no one hear me? How, like, I couldn't believe it. But he ended up, you know, crawling off me, and he just said, do not remove the pillow from your face until I'm gone, and do not tell anybody, because if you do, I will be watching you just like I was watching you and your friends before, and I will come and kill you.
Unbelievable. That's just, you know, I've, and how many times have I heard this story now? And, you know, I there's no words, but oh my God.
You know, I feel the same way too. In many ways, I feel like I've come so far, but it's interesting because my son, he's 11 now, and sometimes he'll come into my room in the middle of the night, and he told me 2 days ago, he's like, Mom, every time I come in, you're like, ah. He's like, what happened to you? That was so dramatic, you know? And I just kind of, I realized, like, as much as you can heal, some things just stick with you. Because it was a nightmare, but I am very lucky that I survived, but it was not, the journey has not been easy. And, you know, I realized quickly when I thought he was gone, I jumped out of the bed, I slammed the door shut, I locked the door, and I frantically looked for clothes and my phone. I knew I'd gone to bed with it and it was gone. So I broke my bedroom window, jumped out, and then ran around to my roommate's master bed. And I just was banging on her outside door, screaming I'd been raped, you know, called 911. And I will never forget the look on her and the guy's face when they just saw me standing there. I had like blood dripping down my entire body, and they were in a deep, when I reflect now, they were in a deep state of shock too, you know. Absolutely. These horrific, violent crimes, they just tear up communities and everybody, not just the people that are the actual victims. It victimizes and terrorizes. I mean, you think about it, we were 19. This is just not unbelievable, you know. And they called 911, and I paced the parking lot. I didn't want to go inside. And it felt like, I mean, I have no idea how long it took. It felt like hours, but I have no idea. And again, no one's around because it's empty. And so I'm just, you know, the sun's up, and finally law enforcement shows up, and I see the police car, and we just lock eyes. He pulls up next to me, and he just mouths the words, "Oh my God," when he saw me. And you know, I don't even think they understood calling 911 how severe it was, right? But, you know, everything kind of went numb after that, everything. And I don't remember much. I was in a deep state of shock, but he was really an angel. He made me feel safe, and he calmed me. He made me feel believed. His name's Officer Williams, and I actually have a book that came out this year. And ironically, the day it was published, I reached out to him to say, you've been such a hero to me, and you're in my story. And he told me, this is the day of my retirement. I can't believe this. So,
oh my God.
I know. And
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Tell everybody the name of the book. What do you do?
So
Come on.
Silent Witness, How DNA Uncovered the Truth and Empowered My Healing. Oh, thank you. There it is. I still can't believe it. So every time I see it, and what an honor that you have.
It's a great book. It's a great read. And it really, and I've heard your story, I don't know how many times. And then reading this, I learned a lot more about you and about everything that happened and what you went through and the healing. And I think this is a very important book for people. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of folks that have gone through the trauma that you have gone through. And I think this book is very powerful. And it's an easy read. I mean, it's not something you're going to get like, oh, this book is so big, I can't get it. You are going to pick this up and you're not going to move till it's done. So I recommend this for and for law enforcement. This isn't just for folks that have been through this. This is for people that are in the field, whether you're a SANE nurse or law enforcement or elected officials, legislators need to read this book.
Thank you for that. Yeah, you know, it's the whole journey. And he was a big part of that because, what I realize now is he was that first touch point, and had he treated me differently, I don't know, I would have been too scared the trauma was so severe. And so he was just such like an angel. And he took me to the apartment. And I remember the first thing I saw in front of my roommate's door was like a bar stool and a pillow and like some like picture frame, because I guess the guy wanted to have warning. So their door would open out. So if anyone heard him, it would knock it all over. And so that was really, it took me aback. And he just, realized quickly she didn't see anything. We need to get you down to a clinic. And I mean, this was before, podcasts like this, maybe CSI was on. I was definitely not watching it. Crime shows to me were not like a thing that I was ever watching, And so I didn't know anything what a rape kit was or what a forensic examination was. I had no idea what he was talking about, but I just remember him saying, we need to get you down there safely and quick. And I was like, I am not going anywhere. I first have to shower. I need to brush my teeth. I want to change my clothes. I feel disgusting. And, my heart just broke when he said, I'm so sorry, you can't do that. And, because now it's like, oh, okay, that's the evidence. And so I trusted him. I went and had a forensic examination done. She was an angel. You've met her, actually, Jennifer. She was another. I had so many incredible people on my path. And I don't remember the hours of the photographs and the swabbing and being in a sterile room. I remember she made me feel safe. And she started a journey of healing for me. And, I worked day and night with detectives. They were incredible. They were tough, and they wanted, they became so invested. They had kids as well, so it became bigger than just me. It was for them. I tried to go to school, but at this point I was all over the news and I was like the victim, and I was all bruised up at the first week of school. And I had to leave class because I had the most intense panic attack, because I thought, is he sitting behind me? He told me,
right.
Only one, he's going to come back and kill me. And it's all over the news now. He's seen probably law enforcement at my apartment if he's watching. I was terrified. So I dropped out of school. I moved to Newport Beach, California, and I eventually relocated back to my home state of Texas. And, over that journey, I went through some really scary times of numbing out with alcohol, everything you can imagine. I wasn't talking about it, living in total silence. But I did find some healing modalities that got me on my feet. I ended up graduating college, which was a really big deal. I got a job, like things that seemed unattainable after my assault. Even without closure, I was healing, but it was 7 years later in Texas, and I got the shocking phone call that there was a DNA match, and I couldn't believe it. The range of emotions, of course, relief, but I was also slightly angry because I thought, why now? I've nearly killed myself, not just from what happened, but like I felt like I was in like the depths of hell, right? And I've crawled myself out. And it was shocking.
Yeah, and that's a very amazing point, because I've dealt with survivors and people have been through this, and the DNA matches come years and years later. I don't even know if what I'm going to say is possible, but you're on that healing process, at least I would imagine, to some degree, as best as you can. And now it's just all of a sudden 8, 7, 8, 9, some cases longer, it just comes right back. Did this just come back as the day it happened when you got that match?
Yes, because I was living in, my own brother didn't know what happened to me. Okay. So once I had left Arizona, I said, I am never being a victim again. I've never talked. So I hadn't processed any of it, right? Like I had not processed it. So it was wild. And the craziest part is, so I moved to Newport Beach, just kind of random, a girl that I went to school with. We both were like, let's just go. It was kind of Thelma and Louise. We packed up at school when everyone was, away for Christmas break, and we didn't tell anyone we were leaving. We just dropped out of ASU and, packed our car up and we left, and we decided we were moving to Newport Beach, California, out of all the places. She was from Minnesota. I was from Texas. We were like, let's just go to the ocean and figure it out.
Yeah.
That's what we did. But crazily, when I get the call, he was actually arrested in Newport Beach.
Crazy.
That's where he's from. And I don't know, have you been to Newport Beach before?
I actually have been to Newport Beach once before when I was like 13 or 14. I was in Newport Beach. I actually camped out on it's another long story, but I camped out on Newport Beach.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's a tiny beach town. If people like
Yes.
listeners aren't familiar, it's very small. I lived on 40th Street. He was apprehended on 41st Street for an unrelated offense. He was trying to break into a home where these 3 young girls lived. Law enforcement officers saw him. They got into some sort of altercation. He ended up resisting the officer's arrest, which is a felony in California. And thankfully, California is one of 19 states. My home state of Texas became the 19th in 2023 that collects DNA for every single felony arrest. Because of that law, it triggered a process that would put him behind bars for nearly 138 years. So when they arrested him, they took his fingerprints at the booking station and his photographs. They took a minimally invasive cheek swab. They uploaded it into our national DNA database, CODIS, which you spoke to earlier. And it hit a match back to mine and multiple others all those years before across state lines. So he had taken odd jobs as like painters. That's probably what was happening. He was working on the apartment in some way. He had traveled all over the world for the Olympics. When they arrested him, not only does he have a wife and a son, but he had a shed behind his home full of women's underwear and ID cards from all over the world.
Actually, talk about, because I'd rather it come from you than from me, the 2013 King versus Maryland.
So after he was arrested, we had to wait 5 years for trial, okay, which is crazy. So, but part of that was because of this very, very, very important Supreme Case Court ruling, Maryland versus King, which you just said, 2013. They found that taking DNA cheek swab for qualifying arrest is a reasonable and just part of the booking procedures. They compare it to fingerprinting. So because of that ruling, and they said it is reasonable under the Fourth Amendment, because of that ruling, we were able to go to trial. And in trial, they were able to prove it was 38 trillion times more likely his DNA than anybody else's. Had they not found that, he would have gotten off and he would still be out there today, raping, harming, and what his sister said, murdering other people.
And I think that's the key. I think, the highest court in the land has spoken. And, not that my opinion matters, but I agree. I mean, we take people's fingerprints. This is not new. DNA is just new technology. And CODIS has been around since 98. It's just new tech. Who knows? Eyeretinas might be the thing that we take in, 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Who knows? But if that's what technology allows, we should take advantage of it. So the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, has ruled. And yet we still have states that are gun shy, including right here in Pennsylvania. And we have some state representatives and state senators here in PA that have tried. And this keeps, we got not close. We got it out of Senate committee last year. But some of our own people here in Bucks County, didn't want it out of committee. And I don't understand that because, what you went through, this could be avoided for other individuals. I'm not sure if it could have ever been avoided for you, but it certainly could have been avoided by others. I don't know the answer how many times he's been arrested, but it's not about that right now. It's about this legislation and your story, because it's not a story we read about somebody else. It's you, who I know very well, and you're live. You're here.
Right. And as the Los Angeles of Pennsylvania, he would still be out there raping and harming other women. He would be under the radar. And this is what we know is happening. A lot of these violent predators, they are not getting caught for the rapes and the homicides, but they are getting caught for lower level crimes along the way, especially felonies, so we have to get them early. And yeah,
I just had this conversation, I told you, we were a little pushed back today because we had an incident here in the courthouse, but I just had this conversation. This is not rocket science. People start off at lower level crimes. People commit other crimes. And you said it, Ashley, he ran under the radar because there are a lot of states that don't have taking DNA at time of arrest. And we just got to end this. We got to be done with this nonsense. And you are the prime example, and you're the perfect spokesperson for this. But go ahead. I don't want to interrupt your story. I apologize.
Absolutely, we do. And there was to flip sides on it, had we not had DNA evidence, the people that are wrongfully convicted from photo IDs or your brain, let me tell you, my brain told me this whole story. There was a guy that called my apartment. He was one of the few people that had been in my apartment, but my roommate had a few different people in and out in that short amount of time that we had been there. And he knew the layout. He wanted to watch like the Ted Bundy movie, which was like, I didn't know anything about that. It was disturbing. So I had to put on like Sister Act on my, after he left,
Right.
like what, like it was really, and it stuck with me. He called my apartment at 3 a.m. that night. So my brain, I didn't see who did this, goes, I need to connect something. It was this guy. There's no way he likes to watch the Ted Bundy movie. He was creepy. He called my apartment. He gave me the heebie-jeebies. He called us at 3 a.m., which had to have been right before this happened. So my brain said it's definitely him. So the law enforcement collected voluntarily about 50 people, and then they ran out because there weren't enough people at school then. He finally got a lawyer and decided he's going to give his DNA. Then it took, months to return it. So all that time in my head, I thought it was this guy. I was shocked when I found out. Yeah. I can tell you, had we not had DNA, I still to this day would have thought with certainty it was this person, because my brain, it's too scary to think it's a stranger and a stalker, and James Tillman, who, we've spoke, but he's now on the board of DNA Justice Project, and hopefully he's going to come on to be a more active role if we can get things, if we can support you in Pennsylvania at all or support legislators, because he was wrongfully convicted of rape and kidnap from a photo identification wrongfully. And his mom was making a mistake, and he says, Mom, hold my stake. I'll be back. I didn't do it, Mom. I'm innocent. And it was 18 and a half years of his life before DNA exonerated him. So he fights for it too. I mean, this is science. This is truth. And honestly, it's kind of archaic that we're not doing it in the criminal justice system. It's just, it's crazy.
It boggles my mind. Listen, and this is what this is why I did this podcast. We've got a lot more stories in weeks to come about things that boggle my mind and things that go bump in the night. We're going to try to do everything, but James Tillman is another great case. And, I am proud to say I got to have a steak dinner with James Tillman in Chicago.
Oh, I love that.
So, and James and I have done some webinars together as well. And I know, you're very close with James, and you hear James's story and you hear the story about the steak and you're like, oh my God, I can't even imagine what that must have been like for him. But that's the exoneration is also, and Dash, you and I were in Harrisburg together, talking with legislators and people that weren't, believers of taking DNA at time of arrest. And okay, you're worried about, you're not so worried about the victim, which I don't understand. But what about the innocent people that get arrested based on positive identifications? DNA is the end all. It is science. It is, there's no personalities. There's no, hairs on the back of your neck with DNA. It's absolute science. And, Ash, maybe, they'll believe coming from you, all we do in law enforcement, as you well know, and working with the labs, is that this person's DNA was on that person. We don't know. What we know is male or female. We don't know if they're, right-handed, left-handed, blue-eyed or brown-eyed, if they have predetermined cancerous genes. We don't know if they're gay or straight. We don't know anything. We don't care. We only care that, hey, your DNA matched this DNA. You broke into that house. You committed a sexual assault on this individual. You did this, you do that. That's all we're interested in. So where's the harm? And, Ashley, you said it so eloquently, much better than I could ever do it. But so take us to trial.
I was terrified. And again, at this point I had built up yoga studios, and in 2014, I became pregnant with my son. I gave birth. And so this was 4 years into the process of them saying, oh, it's another delay. The guy was representing himself for a while, and he was just creating chaos. So finally, I get the call from the prosecutor, Ryan Powell, and he just said, there's no more delays. It was in December of 2014. So my son was 6 months or something like that. And he's like, we're going May of 2015. And I remember just saying oh my gosh, I don't know. My yoga studio is finally turning a profit. And my son is he's so little. It's not natural to be separated. I'm going to have to call you back. I don't know. And just to give your listeners some background, my DNA evidence was the strongest. So we weren't all at trial together. It was going to be mine first. And then I was to go testify in all the subsequent trials as well, because mine had the strongest evidence. And he just said, well, if you decide to not do this, it's totally your decision. But the most he can get would be 10 years. And I hung up the phone. And honestly, again, I wasn't talking about it. And I thought, I don't know, I ignored it, I guess. And over that time, I found out that I was pregnant. And I, will never forget, because my husband at the time and we had a hard time getting pregnant with the first one. So I was shocked that I was pregnant. And then I wanted to find out, boy or girl. The first one we did not. It was a surprise. This one, I'm like, I need to know. And I get that letter from the doctor that's like, you're having a little girl. And I picked up the phone immediately. It makes me want to cry every time I tell that, because I realized in that moment, it took it out of me, and it took it to her, and it took it to everybody's child and everybody's friend. And I thought, you are getting your booty on a plane. And so I called him. I'm like, let's do it. We're going. And so I went very pregnant with my daughter to trial. And it was very scary. Yeah. And this guy said that I followed him to Newport. I mean, it was just being in the same room, and I had to relive the photographs and the 911 calls. And, I did, though. I channeled a lot of strength from my daughter, and I was reunited with a law enforcement officer who saved my life, my forensic nurse, and, the detectives that never gave up hope. They never gave up, and so there was a lot of dark there, but there was so much light. And I just remember going to testify. At this point, he decided a few days in that he wasn't going to represent himself anymore. So I was fully prepared, which I was like, I cannot believe this is a real life thing, but I was fully prepared that he was going to be the one to ask me questions, because he was representing himself at the beginning of trial. But he had a defense attorney come in, got smart, I guess. But I just remember they called my name up, and I went to walk through the little doors, and all of a sudden my body just froze. I felt like my feet were cemented into the ground, and I was having this internal dialogue, you have to go up there. And I was telling myself, no, I cannot move. I can't do this. And the entire left side of my body where this guy was sitting, was just hardened, it felt like. And I kept battling this. And then I just told myself, take a deep breath. I looked back at the prosecutor, and he kind of looked at me, and I rooted my feet down, and I put my hand on my belly where my baby girl was. And I just said, you have to do this, And so I did. And it was really hard, but he eventually, I went home after that, and they called me and said, Ashley, he's guilty. And he was found guilty on all counts. And so it was really so many emotions. But then sentencing wasn't for another year. At this point, I had given birth to my daughter. And I go there, and, I just justice is an amazing thing, but there's so much grief wrapped into it too, because then someone's going to jail for you. It's a very complicated thing, right? It's it's just complex. Okay. And
people don't get it, what goes in here.
Yeah. It's very complex. And I remember the prosecutor just said his family's here when I walked in, and my heart sunk. I start sobbing, and I'm like, family, do not humanize this monster to me. In my head, I'm thinking that. I'm like, I don't want to even think about his family right now. And they said, but no, they're here in support of you, and they want to know if they can talk to you. And we all hugged each other, cried in each other's arms, and just told each other how deeply sorry we were. And his sister stood up to the judge and begged the judge to never let her brother see the light of day. She said she had to grow up with him. She became a detective because of him, and that they are certain he has murdered people. So he was sentenced to 137.5 years because of DNA, and because of this law we have to get, passed here in Pennsylvania and many more states.
Well, Ashley, no one could say it better than you, but, we need our listeners today to call their state representatives and call their state senators. And I don't care where you are on the island, R or D, doesn't matter, independent. I don't care. We're human beings, and we have to protect our people. We have to protect, especially, women. They need to be protected from violent predators. And we have a tool out there that can certainly protect people and limit the exposure that we have for these monsters. And we don't use it because of what reasons? I don't know. People have a lot of bad information. I always said we shouldn't call DNA. We should call it ABC, because people just don't understand DNA. They think this is magical information that cops and the government's going to have all this data on you and they're going to know your ancestry. And this, we're not GenMatch or Ancestry.com or Jerry Springer show. We're not looking for, all these type of things. We're looking to get criminals off the street. That's what we do every day. We find ways to get criminals off the street. And what does that equal? That equals prevention of crime and one less victim. And that's what we need. And you are such a hero. I know you say it to me all the time, and it's not deserved. But you are truly a hero. And what you do traveling and getting up on a plane, and I know if I call you and I'm like, Ashley, I need you on this call, or Ashley, we got to get you to Harrisburg, or you got to get to Washington, or you're going to some other state doing this. You don't bat an eye. You do it. And Ashley Spence, I've been doing this 39 years. You are saving lives. You are making a difference. And you, my friend, are saving lives. And God bless you for that. Silent Witness. It's a must read. Get it out there on Amazon, Ash. You can get it, right?
Yes, you can. You can.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Amazon. Please get it out there. Ashley, I'm gonna leave some last parting thoughts for you to give our audience, our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, first, Sheriff, I want to say you are truly my hero because it makes me emotional. You've been doing this DNA work for years and years and years, and you've been on the forefront of this, the technology and the advancements, and it takes people like you, and it takes time sometimes. But if we can get the listeners, to really get on board with this, because lives are at stake. Lives of our children are at stake, literally, because the violent, repeat serial predators will continue to harm people, and they will go under the radar just as you did. But it was purely through this law, purely through the science, and the wrongfully convicted and accused that are sitting in our prisons, they should never have to spend a day. We have the tools that we need. I've learned traveling all over. We can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. Same with me. We need the people to call in. We need them to make their voices heard. And I think the majority of listeners get shocked thinking, don't we already do this? Don't we already do this? And it's a parting thing. It's a federal law and requirement. Your DNA is expunged and destroyed if you're found not guilty. And it's a really good system, but we need your voices. We need to make action. I know that Sheriff has been working on this legislation for years now, and let's make this the year that it happens. I think, Senator Fari is carrying it. Is that correct?
What's that?
Is Senator Fari carrying it?
Oh, Senator Fari, yes.
Yes,
Senator Fari and a couple of our representatives, Hogan, Marcel Labs, Casey Tomlinson, they're going to be dropping. I know Senator Fari just introduced a crime package. And this is in, I talked to his chief of staff today or yesterday, and I know this is in there again. We've got some other stuff on sextortion that we're trying to get moving in Pennsylvania. To me, I get 39 years. To me, it's a no brainer. Let's do it. Let's do it, House of Representatives. Let's do it, Senate. This is all, you got Ashley Spence is out there, and you got the Ashley Spence right here coming to Harrisburg to tell her story and make it happen. So Ashley, thank you so much. I know I said this to you last time. I had a good feeling. I really got a good feeling this time. We're going to get it done. We're going to get it done because you're out there doing this. And
you too.
A call to action. Folks, you've been listening to Wonder Woman, Ashley Spence from the DNA Justice Project, my hero, my friend, and a woman that saves lives. Thank you for joining us as we explore another aspect of law enforcement in Bucks County. To stay up to date on future episodes and gain further insight into the work we do, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about the Bucks County Sheriff's Office and the services we provide, please visit our website and be sure to download the official Bucks County Sheriff's Office app, available on Google Play and in the App Store. Join us next time for another in-depth look at law and order right here in Bucks County.